Friends, the new Mindyč-gate series has been shaking the country for 3 days, and for 3 days, what NABU and SAP prosecutors are voicing is simply mind-boggling. So, what new information have we uncovered this time around? It was revealed today that the individual whose voice is heard on the so-called Mindyč tapes, the one informally identified by the codename Sigismund or the professor, is quite clearly Halushchenko, currently the Minister of Justice and formerly Ukraine's Minister of Energy. It is highlighted that while he is indeed a person of interest, he is not considered a suspect in this particular investigation. According to the ongoing investigation, Halushchenko implicated Murenyuk and Basov in elaborate schemes designed to legalize funds acquired through unlawful means. However, it's crucial to reiterate that the person of interest is not yet considered a suspect. Thus, Murenyuk Roked, also referred to as Roked, yes, this individual, who had previously been granted a precautionary measure of 126 million, is now eligible for release on bail. He was held for a period of 60 days. He tore up various documents and then proceeded to throw them out of the window. The prosecutors are testifying to this in court. He also threw his mobile phone out the window. Basov, too, was essentially engaged in the same actions. He is another individual who is a person of interest and against whom a notice of suspicion has been issued. Basov, alias Tenor in the recordings, didn't really toss his phone out the window, he completely obliterated it. This is also confirmed by the prosecutors of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. Basov, accompanied by his attorney, was subjected to a precautionary measure by the authorities. The lawyer, in a style reminiscent of Saul Goodman's, if you've ever watched the American hit series Breaking Bad, yes, that's what it's known as, it was something quite analogous to that. Essentially, the money could indeed be anything at all, just not literally square. That's essentially what the attorney declared, but well, that's just how it is. And first, my friends, well, I honestly don't know what to call this situation. Is it perhaps a case of chercher la femme? Chercher la femme. And why is that? Because on one of the fragments of the recordings, then the prosecutor announced in court that there were documented instances where the current, and please pay close attention here, Minister of Energy spent not just one but multiple nights at the home of the former Minister of Energy, who has since been suspended from his position. I will delve into this topic further later. Halushchenko from his post as Minister of Justice. Thus, the incidents were documented on the 23rd and 28th of July, as stated by the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office prosecutor. Let me remind you what was specifically transpiring in our country at that exact time. This was actually the groundwork for the Verkhovna Rada's vote on legislation to cut back the authority of NABU and SAP, the anti-corruption bodies. There, and they were later, yes, voted on and eventually repealed. July 23rd and July 28th. You know, if someone is currently writing that this is some form of chercher la femme, and indeed there are those who are writing it, then perhaps it's not entirely so here. Important individuals were handling grave matters. They were deliberating issues pertaining to the future of the anti-corruption bodies, not all those other things you might have been envisioning. Also, on August 11th, they also spent the night together in the same premises. I don't know what they were doing there, but for instance, People's Deputy Honcharuk suspects that something quite significant was transpiring because, as Honcharuk writes, they were investigating embezzlement within the energy sector, and then all of a sudden they stumbled upon the concept of chercher la femme. It turned out that Halushchenko was having an affair with Hrynchuk, the one who is now the Minister of Energy. Of course, this is a situation where everyone, well, let's use a more appropriate term, engages in intimate relations as they wish. However, I can't imagine any government in any country where a Minister of Energy would be appointed who is a mistress. This whole thing is just surreal. Again, these are Honcharuk's personal impressions. It seems to me that matters concerning the votes were being decided there. However, if Honcharuk believes this approach is more entertaining and you share that sentiment, then you are welcome to enjoy this narrative concerning the unofficial association between Halushchenko and Hrynchuk. Incidentally, as I've already noted, Halushchenko has today been suspended from performing his responsibilities as Minister of Justice. The suspension from duties was formally announced by Prime Minister Sviridенko. And this raises a question for many: why only suspended and not dismissed? The truth of the matter is we exist within a very specific legal framework, and in such a situation it's quite clear situation where we have a parliamentary presidential republic. It's the parliament that dismisses the government. Sviridенko has now taken action within her functional capacity, which includes the power to suspend. However, the parliament must subsequently gather and determine a course of action regarding this matter. Because the government, as we can all plainly see, is already considerably compromised, and this is quite evident. Halushchenko, from his perspective, also issued this statement. He penned this: I spoke with Ukraine's Prime Minister Yulia Sviridенko. I completely agree. A political decision must be made, and then all the details can be sorted out. I am not clinging to the ministerial post, and I will not cling to it. I believe that suspension from duties during the investigation is a civilized and correct scenario. I will unequivocally defend myself within the legal framework and substantiate my position. Thank you. But here's another pertinent question. How exactly will Mr. Halushchenko go about substantiating his stance? And what exactly is the stance he intends to substantiate? In light of the investigation and the recordings indicating Murenyuk and Basov's involvement in multiple very shady schemes, does he still need to demonstrate that his initial stance was indeed the correct one? And it's very interesting what exactly Herman Halushchenko means by that. However, it appears that he is greatly relying on legal backing, which prompts him to make a rather bold statement online. And this is taking place during the first half of the day. It also became known a little earlier that another government official has been placed under suspicion. It is Chernyshov. On the recordings, he features identified by the codename Che Guevara. Detectives from the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office formally documented the transfer of $1.2 million to the person known as Che Guevara. Moreover, an intriguing new episode has recently come to light. We must also await more specific clarification on this matter. Nevertheless, this particular incident pertains to information conveyed by an individual operating under the code name Carlson, who is clearly Mindyč, regarding the necessity to halt certain construction projects and, metaphorically speaking, hide substantial funds within them. Correct? And obviously, if this indeed holds true, the entire puzzle really slots into place quite remarkably. This might refer to information that was previously brought to light last summer in the Mindych-info investigation. That investigation concerned massive construction undertakings, almost like palaces, for very substantial real estate developments in Kozin, just outside Kyiv, you see. And as per this Mindych-info investigation, the focus is on residences under construction for Chernyshov and Timur Mindyk, who is effectively the primary individual of interest in this entire affair, which we are tentatively referring to as the Mindyč tapes. Now, that's a story we will discuss separately later on. Next, we move on to what can only be described as truly shocking content. If you are currently standing, I'd like to kindly request that you take a seat and pay close attention to this particular episode. This involves a judge reciting a transcript from one of the many fragments of thousands of hours of recordings that the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office have submitted to the court. This refers to the personnel rotations taking place within the government at the moment. Yulia Sviridенko, listen. The candidates at that time for positions within the ministry, specifically, the dialogue continues. He states, look, I am definitely replacing Markarova regardless. I have several candidates, all very worthy, close associates. I will send the candidacies and you all can make your selection there. Of course, Shmihal declined the candidates. Do you know why? Yes, because they would certainly be 100% banned. Subsequently, they discussed the Minister of Energy, and ultimately the concluding statement from Murenyuk proposes the third alternative involving the oversight of energy and ecology, which could entail either consolidating the two ministries or maintaining them as separate entities in that manner. But then the question remains. Either she stays here and someone else comes here, or she might come over to this department. Yet all indications point to this, all agree this is a more crucial role for us, namely the energy sector. And on top of that, he wants to bring Yulia into this story and attach her to the Ministry of Economy. Well, that's their particular way of communicating, it seems. And the final sentence of the first paragraph, and the girl really wants to bring Oleg in as a deputy, as she inexplicably finds him quite appealing. I genuinely believe that after all of Monday, Tuesday, and even Wednesday morning, nothing could possibly astound me anymore, my friends. However, this situation, Well, it's just mind-boggling, truly unparalleled in its absurdity. That's quite enough. This narrative is so truly surreal. It entirely transcends understanding, much like how one might describe otherworldly beings, such as demons. They are indeed transcendent entities, wouldn't you agree? Well, it seems to me that this is some kind of transcendent, absolutely fantastic story related to how things apparently work in our country. These are the investigation materials that are currently being read out in court by the judge himself, likely confirming their validity. His hair is practically standing on end as he recites all of this information. Individuals are being appointed to governmental positions, and among them there's a mention of a Yulia, which could potentially refer to Yulia Sviridenko. Can you even imagine the scale of this whole story? The suspension from duties of one minister is happening now. This as well, I'm not sure what to say. And what's more, do you know what else? What is it? This isn't the complete picture, not by a long shot. There's an even more astonishing story to uncover. For the first time ever, in what we're conditionally referring to as the Mindyč tapes, we witness the emergence of. It is quite possibly the figure of the president of Ukraine himself. Ekonomiczna Pravda already published on this. Zelensky called Halushchenko after Mindyk's message. This is proven by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine tapes, and this screenshot, which presumably refers to a conversation and this specific phone call. These materials have now also been appropriately submitted to the court. Minister of Energy. Hello, hi, and then 3 asterisks. The name has been deliberately excluded at this present time. Deliberately, yes, but... Hello, yes, he will arrive soon, won't he? Well, I'm going then. But you claimed nobody was discussing anything with you. And then, bam, yes, with the Minister of Energy, I'm off. And you said nobody talks to you at all. Carlson says, oh yeah, I read that text message. Minister of Energy, and what did you write? Carlson, that so-and-so wants to talk to you. Minister of Energy, no way, Sugarman. No, well, no, just summon and then the name. Carlson, no, excuse me, how many times have I told you this already? Just summon and then the name. Minister of Energy, and what am I supposed to do with him? And then Carlson, listen, and then the name, that's all. Well, you understand, it's not convenient for me to become a street sweeper either. I'll do everything you ask, anything you require. I'm completely at your service. Just give me the green light, confirm I'm fully committed. This could be hidden behind the asterisks. It could potentially be the president of Ukraine on the line. Can you imagine? Can you even wrap your head around that? And now it becomes quite fascinating to further observe the subsequent reactions or lack thereof from Volodymyr Zelensky in this situation. Well, what reactions? The absent reactions, that's what. It seems to me that something more than just a breakdown has occurred within the communication machine. After all, serious individuals are employed in the president's office. I grasp that Ms. Zavirna departed and perhaps matters became somewhat disarrayed. Nevertheless, someone must be present. Litvin, for instance, is there and tasked with managing communication. He is indeed responsible. Currently, the entire vertical power structure within the country has been utterly and completely destabilized. I'm not saying that we might end up with some kind of power vacuum as a result of all these events. No, that will not occur because we are, I repeat, a parliamentary presidential republic and there exist definite algorithms for maintaining control over everything. But where is Volodymyr Zelensky? Is he in Kherson, perhaps, meeting with the main intelligence directorate? Dealing with various matters. But why is this happening with him? Why is there a complete lack of communication? Do you understand? Why is there no communication? Look, a lot of accusations are flying around right now. For instance, Mariana Bezula is writing about this completely incomprehensible communication that's happening today. So, is the president perhaps hiding, avoiding the situation, maybe claiming, I know nothing, I don't want to get involved, or what exactly is transpiring? He is the nation's leader today, isn't he? The leader of a nation where one of the most significant corruption scandals and revelations in the entire history of independent Ukraine is currently unfolding. Bezukhla states, regarding the presidents, I've written more than once, considering this character in his current state to be frankly harmful. I've known Dmytro for a long time. Initially, his talent for quickly drafting speeches for the head of state, grasping concepts, and his apparent modesty could be quite charming. However, all the other worst qualities of an insecure individual who gained access to the leadership's attention and power then began to manifest, and Dasha from Rivne left. What's his current advice to Zelensky? All these trips to Kherson with kids mimicking Angelina Jolie amidst a corruption scandal and Telegram channel management with templated talking points, it's utterly disastrous. Regrettably, the president is increasingly surrounded by his inner circle, but the true issue is far more prosaic and straightforward. Zelensky himself handpicks this very entourage. It's not solely about Syrski. I'd like to present another post to you, which likewise addresses the allegation concerning the absence of, shall we say, proper communication. Wouldn't you agree? To be clear, what I mean is that there's an exceptional and pressing societal demand for information right now. Just look at the immense number of views that these in-depth analyses of Mindych-gate with this Mindyč individual are garnering on YouTube today. Wouldn't you agree? And why is that? Honcharuk states Zelensky did not deliver his evening address yesterday. Right? Did you happen to notice that? It's actually happened before. And thanks to Honcharuk for actually highlighting that, by the way. Indeed, such an event occurred precisely in July 25 when the cardboard revolution unfolded in central Kyiv, directly at the walls of the president's office, correct? It's happened before during protests over NABU. That's the office's situational strategy, Honcharuk's vision, right? First, go to Kherson, pose with kids. Second, block Telegram channels from mentioning Mindyč tapes. 3, suspend Halushchenko. That's not enough anymore. The issue is much bigger now. 4, right? I made a mistake. Inflaming the situation on the front line, which is terrible precisely because of Mindyč, according to Honcharuk. I often criticize Dmytro Litvin. Mention of this guy again, right? Zelensky's closest advisor, but in this situation, it's good that Dmytro is there. His liberal and insecure views, in Honcharuk's opinion, on the contrary, quite often save our country, both in the situation with the NABU protests and now. So, what exactly is Mr. Honcharuk truly implying here? Is he suggesting that Volodymyr Zelensky perhaps received counsel to step back and let the situation unfold organically, thus ensuring he himself would not become personally entangled or held accountable? However, my friends, it has now become undeniably evident that something irreparable has already occurred. If Volodymyr Zelensky's name allegedly surfaces for the very first time on the Mindyk tapes currently concealed behind those 3 asterisks, then a comprehensive and fitting response to this entire situation is absolutely essential and must be delivered. It has to come from the person who is connected to all the other people involved. We understand this cabinet of ministers is, let's say, a provisional coalition chosen by a majority, or rather not a coalition, my apologies, but a so-called mono-majority, even though that mono-majority alone wasn't sufficient. Votes from the Dovira party and other sources were required to form this cabinet and appoint these ministers, and therefore there must be accountability for this. The political party in parliament that brought these individuals into power and continuously conducted reshuffles among them all this time. Who currently represents it now? The parliament, incidentally, remains just as silent. While some individual members of parliament might express their views or positions, that's often the extent of it. Nevertheless, there's no urgent session, for instance, and no immediate public address from President Volodymyr Zelensky has been made. There was absolutely no address from Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday at all. But who exactly made a statement? Do you wish to find out? It was Kvartal 95. Studio Kvartal 95 made an official announcement asking not to be associated with Mindyč because they tell jokes and Mindyč is supposedly a separate matter. But friends, that's not how it works. What do you mean you tell jokes? I was just reading about Mindyč and it turns out he owns 50% of the Kvartal 95 company. What do you mean? Mindyč separate, Kvartal 95 separate? Then, Umerov's statement came after the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine announced yesterday that Mindyk had exerted influence over the Ministry of Defense when it was led by the current National Security and Defense Council Secretary Umerov. Thus, Umerov promptly reacted and posted his message urging people not to inflame the situation, that he will explain everything, meet with everyone, and cooperate. But where is Umerov currently? In Istanbul. He went away on business. Was this specific moment chosen coincidentally? Well, it's quite difficult to ascertain, especially since we are, after all, in the midst of a war, and even the negotiation process for prisoner exchanges has now completely ceased. Thus, there's a need to travel. But at this moment, right now, at this very moment, when you could find yourself, or rather, Umerov is clearly becoming a definite person of interest in this matter. So what's next? Milovanov also quit Energoatom, handing in his resignation. He expressed his grievance, stating, "That's it, I'm leaving." This declaration subsequently gave rise to a plethora of jokes, many suggesting that perhaps Mr. Milovanov felt slighted because he wasn't included or informed, and thus, in a fit of pique, he decided to depart. And do you know what else happened that was unexpected? I'm not entirely sure how directly this relates to this specific Mindyč incident, but on the 7th, Oleksiy Honcharuk, an independent member of the supervisory board of the joint stock company Ukrainian Defense Industry, well, you know, do you recall Oleksiy Honcharuk, the prime minister and reformer, famously riding a scooter? Yes, Oleksiy Honcharuk willingly resigned from the position he had occupied since the 23rd of December in 2023. And here, well, just consider it yourself. Is this an individual getting out ahead of something, or is it simply not connected to anything at all? Well, the timing is interesting too.